Hello and welcome to this economics content training video produced by the Georgia Department of Education. In this video, we will take a closer look at SSEMI2, elements A and B, that deal with introducing the concepts of supply and demand. Supply and demand for many people is synonymous with economics. It's almost a cliched phrase that you often hear in the media or at the water cooler. And it's quite often used in a flippant sense. Why are gas prices high? Well, supply and demand. Why can those scalpers get a higher price for those tickets? Well, supply and demand. Those statements, it turns out, are actually correct, but many times the people who say them don't fully understand why those statements are accurate. Saying gas prices are high because of supply and demand is sort of like saying the reason you stay on the earth is because of gravity, or the way your car engine works is because of internal combustion. Yes, it's correct, but do you really understand how it works? This standard in the Georgia Standards of Excellence is designed to introduce, at a pretty simple level, the concepts of supply and demand to students. In terms of depth of knowledge, we are really only defining and distinguishing in this standard. You can start with either one, but many teachers find it a little simpler to start with demand. In economics, to have demand for something means that you have the ability and willingness to pay for it. Both parts are required, ability and willingness. Many people are willing to buy a private jet, but fewer are able to actually do so. On the flip side, as you get older and you earn more money, you are able to buy more things, but you're not always willing to, like candy or toys, for example. The law of demand is a relationship statement. In the most simple terms, it is defined as the inverse relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity of that good or service that is demanded. The really important word in that definition is the word inverse. This is usually quite simple for students to understand. Choose a product that students are familiar with and maybe purchase somewhat regularly, clothing, pizza, tickets to school events, anything really, and ask how many would like to purchase that item. I'll use a cookie and a fictional class of 30 kids. So I ask how many students would eat this cookie if I just give it to you. Let's say 25 hands go up. Okay, so at a price of $0, the quantity demanded is 25. Well, what if I charge 50 cents? Well, only 20 hands go up now. Why? Well, maybe because some kids didn't want to pay 50 cents, or maybe those 5 kids who dropped their hands weren't able to. Either way, I have a lower quantity demanded at 50 cents than I had at 0. What if I raise the price to $1? Well, let's say only 15 students are interested. Remember, it's just one cookie. I continue this until I reach a point where no one is interested in buying the cookie. When you do this with students, you will generate a data set like the one seen here, which you can then graph. Yours likely won't be as pretty as this, and you may have to get pretty high up in price to get the number to 0, but the overall relationship should be the same. I should point out, you also don't have to get to a quantity demanded of 0. You really only need 2 or 3 points to make the point. To graph this information, we create 2 axes. On the vertical axis, we put price. This is all the possible prices of the good or service we're dealing with, a cookie in this example. For me, this is the price of that cookie at $0 up to the point where I lost all interested buyers. On the horizontal axis, we put quantity. And now it's quite simple to graph our data. Remember the law of demand? Yep, it stated there was an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. And it looks like that is indeed the case. At this point, I want to turn my attention to element B of this standard and distinguish between demand and quantity demanded. This is perhaps one of the most annoying distinctions to have to teach to students because the terminology is so similar. There is, however, a very important difference between these two terms. Quantity demanded is the amount of a good or service a consumer is willing to buy at one price. That's it. One price, one quantity. If you change the price, you change the quantity. Price and quantity always go together. And when you're talking about demand, they go together in an inverse relationship. Well, how is the word demand different? Well, demand represents all the possible prices. It is a line demonstrating a relationship of multiple prices to multiple quantities. This is why there is a law of demand. Let me use our graph to explain further. At a price of $1, the quantity demanded is 15. Say that with me. At a price of $1, the quantity demanded is 15. One price, one quantity. Just to compare, here is that statement said incorrectly. At a price of $1, the demand is 15. That is incorrect because when you use the word demand, you are implying that there are multiple prices. So let's break down the differences one more time, very clearly. Demand is how much of the good or service buyers are willing and able to buy at all the possible prices. Quantity demanded is how much buyers are willing and able to buy at one price. What affects the quantity demanded? Price. Remember the graph. Price affects quantity. Price affects quantity. Price affects quantity. What affects demand? Well, everything else. Anything other than price might have an impact on the demand of the market. See the video on determinants of demand for more about that. What does a graph of quantity demanded look like? Well, just a single point at a single price. Demand is a line representing all the possible prices. Everything I just went over also applies to the difference between supply and quantity supplied, so we don't need to reference all that again. However, the definition for law of supply is a little different. The law of supply states that there is a direct relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity suppliers are willing and able to sell. Well, why is this the case? Well, for most companies, profit is the driving force behind their decision making. Increased profits encourage production. So, as the price of a good increases, it makes the producer more likely to want to sell more of that good or service. Here is one misconception you might run into. From time to time, students will think like this. Well, if the price is low on a good, don't you need to sell more of them to make money? This is a classic example of getting revenue confused with profit. If you get this question from a student, remind them that to make more of whatever it is, the company has to purchase more supplies, pay extra labor, invest in new machines, etc. If the price of that good is low, they are not going to be encouraged to do that. Let's look at our cookie example we used earlier, but this time from the supply side. I'll play the cookie maker. At a price of $0, remember that 25 students wanted cookies. However, at a price of $0, I make literally no money, but I would still have to buy sugar, butter, flour, a bowl, a mixer, and a cookie sheet to make the cookies and spend time. Well, this sounds like a bad deal, so at a price of $0, I wouldn't make any cookies. At a price of $0, the quantity supplied is zero. What if I can sell them for 50 cents? Let's pretend I've done the math, and the smallest batch of cookies I can make costs me $2.50, and I can make 5 cookies with that much material. Well, if I can sell them each for 50 cents, I will break even, and maybe once in a while I'll do that for prizes in class or something like that. So, at 50 cents, the quantity supplied is 5. What if I can sell them for $1? Well, now I would be making a profit on the cookies, and I might find it worth my time to make 2 batches. You start to see how this is going to work. As the potential selling price of cookies increases, I get more and more excited about selling cookies, and I'm willing to devote more of my time and resources to that product. This is the law of supply. When a supply line and a demand line are placed on the graph at the same time, you can see that they cross. This crossing point is an extremely important point in economics and is discussed in great detail in the next video in this series. So to summarize, the laws of supply and demand are relationship statements about how price and quantity interact. The law of demand states that they interact inversely for consumers, while the law of supply indicates they act directly for producers. Remember that these laws rely on the relationship between price and quantity supplied or demanded. The words supply and demand are used when describing the overall market at multiple prices. For a slightly different explanation on these topics, you may want to check out the YouTube channel of MJM Foodie. Her microeconomic video, episodes 12 and 13, deal with these topics directly and are explained significantly differently, which might be beneficial for you to hear.